Imagine this. If the global economy weren't just about numbers, but a gigantic glowing labyrinth, then in every hidden corner, in every flickering corridor, we would inevitably encounter the same shadow, the shadow of debt. But this isn't just a grim shadow, it's a fundamental, all-encompassing paradox that makes us shudder and ask, if absolutely every country on earth is mired in debt, who then is our true creditor? And why has this staggering sum reached an unprecedented $315 trillion? Take a closer look. The modern global economic system, it is permeated by debt to its very core. Pervasive indebtedness, like an invisible yet incredibly strong web, has bound every sovereign nation. It's incredible, yet true. No nation truly exists without debt. And this isn't some random anomaly, no. It is a fundamental characteristic of our world order, an integral part of it. It's invisible, yet absolutely indestructible framework. At the very heart of this colossal system, like a titanic iceberg sailing across an ocean of financial obligations, lie the United States of America. And do you know what they are burdened with? A historically record-breaking national debt. Just imagine, it exceeds a staggering $38 trillion. This is the highest level of government debt ever recorded in U.S. history. More than just a number, it's a reflection of multi-year trends that have shaped their entire economic landscape for decades. This relentless, inexorable rise in American debt is driven by a complex set of powerful factors. And which ones, you wonder? Decades of budget deficits, like an open wound in the budget. Massive funding for costly military operations worldwide, burning through trillions. And, of course, large economic stimulus programs designed to avert crises or pull the economy out of recession. Consider this. The constant raising of the U.S. debt ceiling isn't merely a political issue sparking heated debates in Congress. No, it's a vital economic necessity for the very functioning of the state, for its continued existence, like air to breathe. And now, let's cross the ocean to the cradle of civilization and modern economics. The European Union, this ambitious project, the world's largest economic bloc. You'll be astonished. Its total debt is estimated at approximately $14 trillion. This European debt, though distributed among member states like rivers feeding a common but vulnerable system, carries profound systemic consequences for the financial stability of the entire Union and the Eurozone. It impacts the destinies of millions. It affects the very solidity of the common European home. Even in the land of the rising sun, Japan, the world's third-largest economy, the shadows of obligation stretch incredibly wide. Just imagine, it carries colossal debt obligations nearing $9 trillion. And Japan's debt-to-GDP ratio? It's one of the highest in the world, exceeding 250%. This raises serious questions about the sustainability of such a model. Like a house built on endlessly growing credit, where every new brick is a new debt. One might ask, who could possibly be free from this burden? Perhaps countries traditionally known for their inexhaustible wealth thanks to oil. But no, shockingly. Even Saudi Arabia, this Middle Eastern giant, is burdened by significant government debts. And these Saudi Arabian debts are used strategically. Why? To diversify its economy away from oil dependence, preparing for a future without black gold. And, of course, to fund ambitious infrastructure and social projects designed to transform the kingdom itself and its appearance. Contrary to popular belief about their unshakable financial strongholds, even giants like Germany and China, major export economies, also carry enormous amounts of debt. You'll be amazed, Germany's debt? It's used to fund extensive social programs that support a high standard of living for its population, for infrastructure development, a true economic locomotive, and for supporting European integration, striving for unity. And Chinese debt? It includes both government and corporate debt, actively used to stimulate growth, invest in infrastructure that transforms the country's landscape, and maintain employment, all for social stability. And here, my friends, in this world where everyone, from flourishing giants to developing nations, is bound by an unbreakable thread of obligations, a fundamental financial paradox arises. It challenges all our intuition. Just think, if all states and major economies are debtors, who then acts as the ultimate creditor? This question isn't merely rhetorical. No, it points to the complex, incredibly interdependent nature of the modern global financial system. There are no simple answers here. It's not just a matter of balancing ledgers. This is a vast financial history where money, global power, and historical processes are tightly interwoven into a single, intricate tangle of destiny. The nature of global debt. Oh, it's far from a simple or obvious concept. I'll let you in on a secret. Its functioning is much deeper, more layered, and more complex than it appears at first glance. Like an iceberg, most of which is hidden beneath the water. Debt should not be viewed solely as an economic burden, or as a negative indicator of financial weakness, or, even worse, as a sign of inefficiency. On the contrary, it serves as a key fundamental element of the architectural foundation upon which the entire modern world order and its economic relationships are built, like invisible yet sturdy pillars holding up our entire world. This architecture of debt, it ensures the functioning of global trade, it stimulates international investment, and, most importantly, it maintains the relative stability of financial markets, preventing them from collapsing under the weight of their own contradictions. Consider this. Every significant historical event, from global wars and political conflicts to economic crises and periods of prosperity, is inextricably linked to these invisible scaffolding of debt. They support, they alter the course of events, like an invisible director guiding destinies. Large-scale wars, they are often financed through enormous borrowings, sharply increasing the national debt obligations of participating states, leaving behind not only destruction, but also financial ruins. Deep economic crises, absolutely. They lead to a significant increase in government debt. Why? Due to the necessity of large-scale government intervention and stimulus programs that rescue economies from complete collapse, and even periods of economic boom. They too are accompanied by growth in lending and investment, both private and public. The result? An increase in overall debt, like euphoria before an inevitable awakening. But a deep analysis and consistent tracking of the complex chain of creditors in this system reveals a surprising and perhaps unsettling truth. You'll be astonished. It turns out that the world as a whole does not owe money to any single specific external subject or entity outside its system. As if there's no external judge. In essence, the world owes money to itself. This points to the closed, self-referential, and deeply interdependent nature of the global financial system. It's an endless cycle. It means that money and debt circulate within one large global economy, moving from one participant to another, like blood through the veins of a single organism. However, this self-indebtedness by no means implies that the benefits and costs of such a system are distributed evenly or fairly among all participants in the global economy. Here's the catch. On the contrary, there are clear winners and losers in this complex game. And this, unfortunately, only exacerbates social and economic inequality, widening the gap between them to unimaginable proportions. For a comprehensive understanding of this current, critical juncture, with our planet mired in a cumulative debt exceeding $315 trillion, we simply must delve into its historical roots, like an ancient scroll revealing secrets. And did you know that the total sum of global debt, that very $315 trillion, is almost 3 times the size of the entire global economy? This highlights the unprecedented scale of financial dependence and its potential systemic risks for the future, like a colossus standing on feet of clay and ready to crumble. The idea of government debt, you'd never guess when it originated. Centuries before the advent of modern financial instruments, before credit cards, digital transfers, or electronic exchanges. The concept of state borrowing was not born in modern high-tech financial centers like Wall Street or the City of London. No. Its genesis was inextricably linked to the pressing need to finance military conflicts and maintain armies, that very ancient need of states to preserve power. to survive. Let's go back to 1694. Imagine this. England was entangled in a costly and protracted war with France, the War of the League of Augsburg. This conflict led to an acute shortage of gold and other liquid assets in the treasury. It threatened the continuation of military operations, literally exhausting the crown's resources to their limit. King William III of England, facing a severe financial crisis, was forced to seek help from wealthy merchants and bankers, from those who held the reins of trade and wealth. The merchants agreed to provide the crown with the necessary financing, but in return, they demanded the promise of perpetual interest payments. Thus began a new era of relations between power and capital. These payments, by the way, were guaranteed by the state's future tax revenues, which of course gave them a high level of reliability and attractiveness for investors, like a firm handshake sealing a new era. And so, to effectively manage this new complex mechanism of government borrowing, the Bank of England was specifically established in 1694. Indeed, the creation of the Bank of England was a truly revolutionary event in global financial history. It laid the foundations of the modern central banking system, and it changed the game forever. Just imagine, it allowed the state for the first time to spend money it didn't physically possess, based on future revenues and credit. This radically altered all fiscal policy, as if permitting a leap into the abyss secured by the future. In return, the financing merchants and investors received something extremely valuable, a formalized and guaranteed promise from the government. This promise took the form of debt obligations that could be freely exchanged, bought, or sold on the nascent market, creating unprecedented liquidity. Thus, government bonds were born. And most importantly, they became the prototype and foundation of the entire modern financial system of all capital markets, the bedrock upon which the future would be built. This innovative system, my friends, it spread across the world like a swift and unstoppable virus. France immediately copied it to finance its own military needs and economic development, trying to keep pace with its neighbor. The Netherlands, known for its financial innovation, significantly improved these mechanisms, making them even more efficient. And the newly formed United States, striving for independence and strengthening sovereignty, they adopted the system of government bonds to finance their war of independence. Just imagine, they literally bought freedom on credit. Later, the U.S. also used bonds to finance massive westward territorial expansion, land acquisition, and national infrastructure development. They built the future on debt promises. Government debt, my friends, gradually transformed from a sign of financial weakness, insolvency, or inefficient management as it was in the beginning. I'll let you in on a secret. It became a key measure of trust in the state, in its institutions, in its ability to meet obligations and guarantee stability, like a credit rating for nations. A government's ability to effectively borrow large sums of money now directly correlated with its political legitimacy and its capacity to effectively govern the country, maintaining its power, showing who was in charge. In the historical past, empires conquered territories. For what purpose? Primarily for direct access to valuable natural resources, gold, silver, precious stones. They physically seized wealth. But in the new financial paradigm, here's the trick. States began issuing bonds to collect interest. This changed the fundamental method of accumulating wealth and influence, from physical to financial, from the sword to figures. The battlefield for global dominance and economic supremacy shifted from physical territories and direct conquests to the financial balance sheets of states and market mechanisms. Now, new rules of the game dictate the course of events. Let's fast forward 3 centuries to the rapid 21st century. And what do we see? Debt has become the dominant item in global capital exports and imports, its primary currency. This means that the export of obligations and the earning of interest on them have become a key element of the global economy, a method of generating income. Like the air the entire system breathes. You'll be amazed. Currently, global borrowing increases by the equivalent of $1 trillion every 100 days. This pace of growth signifies an unprecedented, consistently high rate of global debt accumulation, and this raises serious concerns about sustainability, like an unstoppable snowball-gathering avalanche speed. Every country in the world, absolutely every single one, is embedded in this system of indebtedness, playing the role of either a major debtor or a significant creditor, or both roles simultaneously, like a complex theatrical performance from which there is no exit. Incredible, yet true. Nations completely free of debt simply do not exist. This indicates their full integration into the global financial system, from which there is no escape. Every major bank actively participates in the process of lending. To whom? Governments, corporations, individuals, acting as a key intermediary, the nerve center of the system. And did you know that banks not only provide loans but also create money? Through the fractional reserve mechanism tied to debt, like alchemists transforming promises into reality. And even each of us, every citizen, through our tax payments, personal savings, and retirement contributions, simultaneously becomes both an indirect debtor and an indirect creditor, unaware of our dual role. This dual role of citizens underscores their inextricable link to the state financial system, like invisible threads binding us to a common destiny. And here, a critical question arises. Who exactly is the ultimate holder of these colossal global debt obligations? If, as we've discovered, everyone owes. To begin, let's consider the situation with the United States. After all, its debt holds not only national but also profound global significance, a huge impact on the world economy, like a gravitational center drawing everything around it. Of the total U.S. national debt exceeding $38 trillion, approximately half is in what is called public circulation. And what does that mean? Here's the key. It means that these debt obligations are owned by investors outside the U.S. federal government and its agencies, like promises scattered across the globe awaiting their time. Approximately 2/3 of these public investors are American organizations, funds, and private individuals, like a vast interconnected family owning its own bonds. Just imagine. These include the largest American commercial banks, significant holders of government bonds ensuring their liquidity and stability. Huge U.S. pension funds, also crucial players, securing future payments for retirees, the foundation of their well-being. Mutual funds actively invest in government debt, offering unit holders stability, diversification, and investment liquidity, like a quiet harbor in a storm. U.S. insurance companies use Treasury bonds as reliable collateral for their reserves, obligations, and long-term planning, like an unbreakable safe. And the U.S. Federal Reserve itself. It is one of the largest holders of government debt, especially after quantitative easing programs aimed at stimulating the economy. The Fed has become not just a regulator, but an active player. This points to the deepest interconnection between the Fed's monetary policy and the U.S. government's fiscal policy. Like two halves of a single whole, inextricably linked by fate. The remaining 1/3 of public U.S. debt, approximately $9 trillion, is held by foreign governments, central banks, and private investors from around the world, like jewels scattered across the planet. Who leads among foreign holders? Japan. It holds approximately $1 trillion in treasury securities. Why? Japan's investments in U.S. debt are driven by the need to deploy large trade surpluses, maintain currency stability, and seek reliable assets, like a wise strategist foreseeing the future. Japan is followed by China, holding roughly $800 billion in U.S. Treasury securities. China's share of American debt is the result of accumulating massive trade surpluses and managing colossal foreign exchange reserves, like an untouchable reserve of strength. And among other major foreign holders are the United Kingdom, Luxembourg, and Belgium. They, by the way, are key international financial centers and jurisdictions, like centers of attraction for capital from all over the world. So, my friends, while the statement "the U.S. owes China" is technically true, China's share constitutes only about 2% of the total U.S. national debt. Here's the key. This debunks the widespread myth that China is the primary owner of the American economy through debt. No, it's just a small slice of a massive pie. The overwhelming portion of American debt is actually owned by America itself. This creates a unique internal dynamic and a circular mirror effect, where the reflection is the reality. What does this mean? That American taxpayers pay interest on the debt to American investors, closing the financial cycle within the country, like a perpetual motion machine operating on self-sufficiency. Picture this ingenious mechanism. The U.S. Treasury regularly issues new government bonds to raise necessary financial resources, like an incessant demand for resources. American banks, investment funds, and other institutions, they actively buy these new bonds, providing initial financing for government programs, like a vanguard carrying money. And the Federal Reserve? It often buys bonds on the secondary market through open market operations, essentially creating new dollars right out of thin air, like a magician materializing money. This Fed purchase process, it increases the money supply, influences interest rates, and stimulates economic activity, like an invisible economic conductor directing its rhythm. American citizens pay taxes, part of which goes to fund interest payments on government bonds. Unwittingly, but participating in this, these interest payments, in turn, go into American pension accounts, investment funds, and other financial institutions, completing the internal cycle, creating a sense of financial self-sufficiency. This creates a complex circular mirror effect. Debt is real and tangible, but the primary creditor is a reflection of the same internal system. Like the Ouroboros, the mythical serpent devouring its own tail. And this circular dynamic of borrowing and lending, it's not unique to the U.S. alone. No, it has a fundamental, widespread global character encompassing the entire planet. Just imagine, Japan actively provides credit to the U.S. by purchasing Treasury securities. It supports the American economy and its trade position like a dance partner. The United States, in turn, provides significant financial aid and loans to Europe through the IMF, playing the role of a rescuer. But these loans are often tied to conditions, to economic reforms, austerity measures, ensuring financial stability in recipient countries, like threads from which conditions and destinies hang. Europe directs loans to developing countries through the World Bank, fostering their infrastructural, social, and economic development, sowing the seeds of progress. And developing countries, in turn, repay loans to developed economies by placing their foreign exchange reserves and investing in Western bonds. Closing, this endless circle, this planetary choreography, this is described as a planetary game of hot potato, where each participant passes debt obligations to one another, trying not to be left holding them for long, like a burning object that scalds. In this metaphorical game, the potato consists of financial promises and obligations, not tangible assets or money in the direct sense. Every country in the global system holds an IOU issued by another country, creating a complex network of interdependence and mutual guarantees, like a house of cards where each element depends on another. Every financial promise, in essence, is backed by another promise, forming a multi-layered credit structure built on trust, like a multi-story building without a foundation. This resembles a complex poker table where each player has borrowed some of their chips from other participants, which makes the game deeply interdependent and fragile, where the loss of one threatens all. And do you know the one unwritten rule that maintains the stability of this global financial game? It is, no one should fight or drop out of the game. This means that no major player should default on its obligations or drastically undermine trust in the system, to avoid a chain reaction that would sweep everything away. Beyond states and financial institutions, there is also a fourth, most powerful level of control over credit and capital flows, and these are the financial markets themselves, invisible yet omnipotent. You'll never guess who stands behind them. Behind every government bond lies a vast, invisible, and intricately structured network of institutional investors and asset managers. Key players in this network? These are hedge funds, which aggressively manage risks and returns using complex strategies, like market predators tracking their prey. Huge pension funds, also critically important players. They invest the savings of future retirees in long-term, stable government bonds, securing their future. Sovereign wealth funds, managing national assets and reserves, play an influential role by making large strategic investments globally, like shadow rulers managing capital. And finally, central banks, managing tens of trillions of dollars in assets. They are the primary and most influential market participants capable of shaping it, like a sculptor shapes clay. These institutions, they effectively act as the true arbiters of global credit, determining the availability and cost of borrowed funds for nations, delivering their verdict. It is they who determine which countries can borrow funds at low interest rates, enjoying high investor confidence and demand. Like the chosen few, admitted to the Premier League, and conversely, they decide which countries will be forced to pay a high-risk premium to ensure their economic survival and prevent default, like those condemned to an eternal struggle. But what happens when these market institutions lose confidence in a country's ability to service its debt? The consequences can be catastrophic and immediate. Imagine, the currencies of such countries can sharply devalue, leading to hyperinflation, a loss of purchasing power, and a decline in living standards. Destroying savings. Governments can fall due to an inability to finance their obligations, causing profound political instability and social unrest. Leading to chaos, entire national economies can be restructured literally overnight at the directives of international creditors and market regulators, as if by decree from above with no right to object. Democratic processes determine who will govern a country at the political level, expressing the will of the people through elections. But this is just one side of the coin. Shockingly, financial markets, in essence, decide which state will survive economically. And this, regardless of political will and popular sentiment, like an invisible hand of fate, delivering its merciless verdict. The supreme market maker, the modern high priest of this global financial system, is the central bank. And did you know that central banks don't just manage existing government debt, they actively participate in its creation and the expansion of the money supply, like factories for conjuring reality out of nothing. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, they create new money, literally out of thin air, materializing it from nothing. This process of debt monetization is a fundamental and integral mechanism of the modern monetary system. Its deepest foundation, an obligation recorded on one entity's balance sheet, for example the state treasury, instantly becomes an asset on another's balance sheet, a central bank or a commercial bank, like an endless chain of transformations where one gives rise to another. In essence, my friends, every dollar, euro, yen, or any other currency in circulation, it represents a unit of debt existing somewhere in the system, as if every banknote is someone's promise. Shockingly, in the modern financial paradigm, the concept of debt-free money simply doesn't exist. Every unit of currency is someone's obligation, created through credit, like every cell in an organism being part of a whole. Every physical coin, every banknote, every digital dollar contains an invisible IOU engraved on its surface, symbolizing a connection to credit, like an ancient symbol holding the secret of its origin. For many decades, this complex cycle of global debt has been successfully maintained, thanks to what? The universal trust of market participants in its stability. As long as investors believe in government's ability to pay interest on debt, even if the principal debt is not repaid, the financial machine continues to function, as if faith is its sole fuel. This trust is based on the perception of a government's reliability and its ability to collect taxes and print money. These are the two pillars of its power. However, history has repeatedly shown us what happens when this fundamental trust weakens or completely disappears like smoke. A striking, and it must be said, instructive example is Greece in 2010. At that time, its national debt simply became unpayable amidst an economic crisis, like a knot that cannot be untied. Just imagine, Mass panic seized holders of Greek government bonds, foreshadowing an inevitable default and loss of investments, like an approaching storm sweeping everything in its path. This led to a sharp, dangerous surge in yields on Greek bonds, making new borrowing extremely expensive and inaccessible. Closing all avenues to salvation, the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund were forced to intervene urgently. Why? To save Greece from complete financial collapse and exit from the Eurozone, preventing a chain reaction. Their bailout packages, however, came with extremely harsh, unpopular austerity measures imposed on Greece, like bitter medicine that kills slowly. These measures included significant tax increases for the population, escalating their financial burden during an already difficult period. Massive cuts in public spending, affecting social programs, pensions, salaries, healthcare, stripping people of their last resorts. The consequence was mass unemployment, impoverishment of the population, and profound social upheavals, like wounds that don't heal for decades. For an entire generation of Greeks, the concept of salvation is inextricably linked with forced sacrifices, deprivations, and a loss of sovereignty, leaving a deep scar in the nation's history. Similar dramas unfolded in other parts of the world. In Argentina, for example, repeated defaults on national debt turned it into a veritable national curse, undermining economic growth, stability, and investor confidence, like an evil fate pursuing the country. And Sri Lanka? In the recent past, it faced acute shortages of fuel, food, and medicine, and a subsequent political collapse. Why? The government had exhausted all its foreign currency reserves needed to service external loans and import goods, leaving the country on the brink of survival, hanging by a thread over the abyss. When the global debt system begins to crumble or faces a crisis, you'll be amazed. Previously invisible creditors suddenly become very prominent and incredibly influential. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, comes to the forefront, with its demands, restructuring conditions, and monitoring of financial discipline, like a strict teacher arriving to restore order in the classroom. International rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch, play a key role, lowering countries' credit ratings and making borrowing more expensive, like judges passing a verdict that cannot be appealed. And anonymous bondholders, large investment funds, and banks, they begin to dictate terms, exerting immense pressure on governments, like powerful puppeteers pulling strings. These powerful entities, in essence, hold entire countries by the throat during crises, demanding radical reforms and concessions, forcing them to bend to their will. And yet, my friends, even after massive crashes, defaults, and social upheavals, the same fundamental logic of borrowing and refinancing, it restarts. Incredibly, yet true, like an indestructible machine destined for perpetual motion. New loans are actively provided to replace old, overdue, or defaulted obligations. This keeps the system afloat and prevents total collapse, like an endless attempt to patch holes in a ship that continues to sail. Old debts are carefully restructured, sometimes even with a haircut for creditors. For what purpose? To create a new basis for the system's functioning, like a surgeon amputating a part to save the whole organism. The financial machine restarts, often under a new name, with new conditions or actors, but on the same fundamental balance of debt, like a play that changes its scenery but not its eternal essence. Why does this happen? Because in the 21st century, government debt is not intended for actual full repayment, not in the traditional sense of private credit. I'll let you in on a secret. Its main critically important function is to be constantly refinanced, maintaining the continuity of financial flow and global economic stability, like eternal motion without beginning or end. Modern governments, in reality, do not plan to pay off their debts completely, neither in the near nor in the distant future. And this situation, it's not part of some secret conspiracy. No, it's rather an established and widely accepted economic policy. It's a systemic fact, like an unwritten law governing our entire world. Unlike private individuals or corporations who are expected to repay both interest and principal debt, governments operate under different, completely unique rules. They view their debt as a kind of rolling subscription to financial resources, liquidity, and the maintenance of stability. Like a monthly payment for some vital services, they constantly issue new government bonds to pay off old obligations when they come due, thereby ensuring continuous financing. Like an endless relay race where the baton is passed from hand to hand. This process, called refinancing or rolling over debt by economists, is the foundation of modern fiscal policy in all developed countries. Its continuous pulse. In this system, interest on debt, it becomes a real product, and not just a cost or a fee for using capital. Indeed, interest payments transform into a rental fee for stability within the global financial system, ensuring liquidity, trust, and the smooth functioning of markets, like a payment for the very life of the economy. Today's global economy vitally depends on this rent, constantly generated by debt turnover and interest payments. It functions like a shark that must constantly move, borrow and refinance to breathe and exist in its aquatic environment without stopping. Otherwise, it will simply die. The modern global financial system primarily rests on trust in the ability to service debt, rather than on the actual repayment of the principal debt. I'll let you in on a secret. The United States, with its $38 trillion debt, will never repay it in full. Why? Because it's impossible, and even undesirable for the system. Instead, they will refinance it forever, maintaining the current financial balance and ensuring the liquidity of the Treasury bond market, like an unending dance that never concludes. Japan is a striking example of a successful refinancing strategy. It has been applied for decades, and this is despite a debt exceeding 250% of GDP. Like a Zen master who has achieved perfect balance between debt and stability. Indeed, despite the astronomical size of the debt, the yields on its government bonds remain extremely low, close to zero, which indicates the highest investor confidence, like unshakable faith. Investors buying Japanese and other government bonds do not expect full repayment of the principal debt on time. No, they expect a constant extension of the deal. That is, the opportunity to reinvest their funds and continue receiving interest income, ensuring stability, like the promise of tomorrow, which always comes. For these investors, government debt is the most reliable collateral, the most liquid asset available in the market, minimally exposed to risk, like the most precious gem in a treasure chest whose value never diminishes. U.S. Treasury bonds? They are not perceived by the financial world as a liability. That is, as a burden or high risk. On the contrary, they are considered a fundamental base asset, forming the bedrock of global financial markets and global financial stability. Like the cornerstone upon which the entire edifice stands, imagine, these bonds are actively used by pension funds worldwide to ensure investment stability and guaranteed payouts to future retirees, protecting their old age. Banks use U.S. Treasury securities as collateral for various credit operations, margin requirements, and for managing liquidity, like a universal key opening any financial door. And central banks, they treat these bonds almost as the equivalent of money, using them in open market operations and for managing monetary policy, like their own most reliable currency. The entire global financial system depends on one thing, that governments never fully repay their debts. They maintain a constant volume of highly liquid assets, without which the system would simply halt. What would happen if governments suddenly repaid all their debts? The world would lose its most reliable liquid and crucial financial instrument, as if it lost its air. Just imagine a hypothetical scenario. Washington decides to pay off its entire debt down to the last dollar. And then what? Banks and investment funds worldwide would suddenly lose their most stable, safe, and liquid asset. This would cause chaos comparable to an apocalypse. The supply of dollars in global markets would sharply decrease, leading to deep destructive deflation. Deflation, in turn, would trigger a global economic collapse, destabilizing the entire world financial system and causing a recession, like a chain reaction leading to the complete destruction of the entire world. Thus, my friends, The full repayment of debt would actually destroy the mechanisms that ensure the functioning and stability of the modern economy. Here's the key. Therefore, governments act in precisely the opposite way. They continue to issue new bonds to maintain the system and its liquidity, as if endlessly pouring oil on a fire that must never go out. And you know, the issuance of bonds is not reckless or chaotic, but in a rhythmic and predictable manner, fully corresponding to market needs and fiscal plans, like an unceasing heartbeat giving life. Debt, it transforms into a kind of pulse of capitalism itself, continuously pulsating in every part, in every segment. This pulse of debt is felt everywhere, in every pension program, every mortgage, every consumer loan, and in every financial market worldwide. It permeates all spheres of our lives. That's why when politicians talk about balancing the budget or paying off the national debt, I'll let you in on a secret. They are selling society a certain illusion, a beautiful fairy tale designed merely to reassure. The true goal of fiscal policy is not to completely eliminate debt or reduce it to zero. No, the goal is to maintain debt in a sustainable, functional, desirable, and manageable way over the long term, like a trainer managing a powerful but dangerous predator. It is crucial that the financial system and its participants never stop believing in the value and reliability of this debt. Why? Because as soon as faith in the system fades, the debt figures themselves cease to have any meaning or value. They become mere paper, depreciating to zero. Investor and market confidence collapses. This leads to a sharp spike in interest rates and a massive outflow of capital from the country. Like a panicked flight, sweeping everything in its path, an economy built solely on promises and trust quickly grinds to a halt, leading to chaos, unemployment, and poverty, bringing down an entire world. And here, in this, lies the true, deep, hidden secret of sovereign debt and its functioning in the modern world. I'll let you in on a secret. The plan was never to fully repay it. Not in the traditional sense, like a private loan or mortgage. The plan was something else, to convince the world to believe that it would be repaid or continuously serviced, thereby maintaining the financial illusion and the continuous flow of capital. Like an eternal spell holding reality in place, this is a closed, self-sustaining cycle based on trust and faith in the continuity of the system and its obligations. And as long as this trust endures, debt figures can grow almost infinitely, without causing an immediate collapse or default, like a magical formula sustaining balance. However, it should be noted, this trust and the benefits of the entire system are distributed extremely unevenly among different layers of society. They create a profound, incurable rift. The statement, "we owe ourselves," is only half true. It conceals deep social and economic imbalances, as well as glaring injustice. And do you know how interest payments on government debt are distributed? Far from evenly and far from fairly. These payments are made in a bottom-up direction. From whom? From taxpayers, workers, and ordinary citizens. To whom? To large financial institutions, wealthy investors, and capital holders, for they are the primary holders of the debt, like an invisible pump siphoning resources from one part of society to another. In other words, my friends, debt isn't just a financial transfer between countries or governments. No, it represents a systemic transfer of wealth, income, and resources between different social classes and population groups, exacerbating inequality to its limits. Here's the key. That's why global income and wealth inequality and global indebtedness are growing simultaneously. This points to the deepest structural link between these two phenomena, where one feeds the other. Like the roots of an ancient tree, the system deliberately rewards those who own debt obligations, providing them with stable income, capital accumulation, and increased influence. And it punishes those who are merely forced to repay these debts through taxes, inflation, reduced social services, and opportunities. Like a ruthless judge delivering a verdict to everyone. This situation has striking analogies with private debt, but it manifests on a much larger global scale and complexity. The principles governing debt apply at all levels, from individual households and businesses to nation-states and the entire planet. It's a universal, undeniable law. Creditors are not necessarily villains, and debtors are not always innocent victims. They represent two interconnected, interdependent sides of one powerful economic engine, operating on trust. Like light and shadow, inseparable parts of a single whole. The main and critical problem arises when this engine starts to run out of fuel for its continuous operation and dynamic maintenance. You'll be astonished. This happens when new borrowings simply cannot keep pace with the volume of previously made financial promises for interest payments and refinancing, like a clock stopped without winding, frozen forever. It is then that the question, "Who is the creditor?" ceases to be an abstract philosophical query or an economic theory. It becomes intensely personal, pressing, threatening for every member of society and for the stability of the entire system, affecting absolutely everyone without exception. At the apex of this global financial pyramid, there is no single obvious culprit, no scapegoat to point a finger at. And do you know who the real culprit is? The culprit is not exclusively China, as is often simplistically presented in media and political rhetoric. The culprit is not solely Wall Street with its powerful financial institutions. The culprit is not just the International Monetary Fund with its austerity conditions. No, it's the aggregate of all these entities, their actions, interactions, and structural features. And also, us. Everyone who participates in and depends on this financial system, like an invisible web in which we are all entangled, being both victims and architects. The modern financial system has undergone an astonishing transformation. It has turned debt itself into money, into its very foundation and source. Just imagine how it works. Governments issue debt obligations. They serve as the basis for creating new money and ensuring liquidity in the economy. Banks then multiply these debt obligations through lending and fractional reserve mechanisms, expanding the money supply. Investors actively trade these debt obligations on global markets, creating liquidity, determining prices and yields. And we, the citizens, we depend on this debt system to ensure the functioning of our daily lives, access to loans, mortgages, and economic opportunities. The line between debtor and creditor in this complex, interconnected, and dynamic system, it is blurred beyond recognition. In ancient times and early history, debt was often associated with slavery, loss of freedom, social status, and personal autonomy. It carried a distinctly negative connotation, like a brand of shame. Today, however, it symbolizes balance, stability, economic growth, and the continuous functioning of the global economy. Like its engine, tirelessly driving the world forward. However, if this delicate balance is ever disturbed, if fundamental trust is undermined or vanishes from the system, then the illusion of stability will end. And we will be forced to remember what debt truly is. Remember, debt is a promise that cannot be kept forever. Its nature is temporary, and it always requires constant servicing and renewal, like a flower that withers without water. To deeply understand the mechanisms governing our world and to foresee future economic shifts, study the history of financial systems. It holds all the answers and lessons, like an ancient manuscript, a key to the future.